I knew something was wrong the second my sister tapped her glass. The sound was too sharp, too rehearsed, like she'd been practicing it in the mirror all morning. And before anyone could swallow their last bite of turkey, she stood up, smiling like a girl stepping into a spotlight she'd been promised her whole life. Mom and Dad are signing the house to me. Grace gets nothing. Cheers exploded around me. Whistles. Applause. My aunt actually slapped the table and yelled, "About time." I didn't blink. I didn't speak. I just smiled, the kind of smile you wear when the storm finally hits and you're the only one at the table who already knows the roof is theirs, not yours. I set my fork down. Slowly. Deliberately. The metal clicked against the plate like a countdown. "Dad, should I tell them, or will you?" He froze. No, he didn't just freeze, he drained. Like every lie in his body suddenly had nowhere left to hide. My sister's grin collapsed into a tight line. All around us, the room dipped into a hungry silence. Relatives leaned in, sensing a crack in the perfect little play they'd been fed for months. Before I take you deeper into what came after that silence, I need to ask you something. Where are you listening from tonight? Because if you've lived through a family like mine, you'll understand why my voice didn't shake, why their applause didn't touch me, why I didn't feel 1 ounce of fear when I pulled the truth into that room. My name is Grace Justice, and people used to look at my family and swear we were close. Matching sweaters and holiday photos. Cards with forced smiles. Voices always soft, polite, controlled. But families like mine don't break in shouting matches. We crack in silence. We fracture in the places no one wants to look. And for most of my life, I lived in that quiet space, the invisible daughter, the afterthought. People only noticed me when they needed something, and they always needed something. Lena, my younger sister, never knew that space. Favorite. The golden one. Bright, loud, adored in a way I never learned how to be. Relatives fawned over her at gatherings. She's such a spark. She's a natural. Meanwhile, I became useful, reliable, the one who didn't need praise to keep going. I didn't hate her. I just saw the truth early. If I wanted anything in this life, I'd have to build it myself. Growing up, I watched my parents pour attention into Lena like she was a fragile plant that needed constant watering, dance classes, summer camps, private lessons. When I asked for the same things, we suddenly couldn't afford it. But for Lena, the money always appeared. When I moved to Chicago for a job, they called me selfish. Selfish for choosing independence. Selfish for not living 15 minutes away like Lena. They guilt me, scolded me, treated distance like betrayal. But Lena? She visited every weekend. She slid perfectly into the daughter role they carved just for her. And they adored her all the more for it. I still came home for holidays. Not for them. For my grandmother, Evelyn. Silver hair, sharp mind, the only person who ever looked at me with real pride. Every time she hugged me at the door, she whispered something soft like, "You're stronger than they think." And then she'd retreat back to her chair, leaving me with enough warmth to last until the next holiday. Nothing about this Thanksgiving felt right. The air was thick, anticipatory. My mom wore that tight smile she saves for lies. My dad couldn't hold my eyes for more than a heartbeat. Lena kept smoothing her dress, even though it was spotless. And when I walked into the dining room, I noticed something else. An empty chair next to mine was missing. Not moved. Not tucked away. Gone. I should have known. But denial is comfortable, until it isn't. I sat down anyway, smoothing my napkin across my lap, pretending not to see conversations dip every time I walked into a room. People paused when I entered, like someone hit mute, then picked back up again, louder, faker, once I passed. Lena floated around like a parade queen, adjusting centerpieces, checking angles, offering mom little comments that made them both smile with conspiratorial delight. Every now and then she looked at me with that tight-lipped, polite smile, the kind you give a coworker you barely tolerate. It wasn't always like this. Once, we were just sisters, sharing a room, braiding hair, whispering late at night. She used to steal my sweaters and beg me to drive her everywhere the second I got my license. But somewhere between adolescence and adulthood, she stepped into the role they built for her, and I slipped out of frame. The house situation didn't start at Thanksgiving. It started 6 months earlier. A humid Saturday in June. Mom called me home, said it was important. When I arrived, they ushered me straight to the dining table. Dad had a folder laid out like some corporate presentation. Mom's smile was stretched too wide. We're refinancing the house. Just a simple signature. Better rates. You won't have to worry about anything. Even then, something in my chest tightened. They never asked for my help unless they needed more than they'd ever admit. I flipped through the papers. Too many pages. Too many blacked out amounts. Too many rushed explanations. Can I take these with me? My lawyer can look them over. The silence told me everything. Mom's smile twitched. Dad snapped the folder shut too fast. It's just a formality. Why complicate things? But I took the folder anyway. Back in Chicago, my lawyer called the next morning. Her voice was flat, serious. This isn't a refinance. This is a transfer of liability. If you sign this, you're responsible for their debt. Debt? The word didn't even register at first. She explained slowly: missed payments, foreclosure letters, a second mortgage I knew nothing about. Debt stacked upon debt upon desperation. When the call ended, something inside me locked into place. Not anger, not yet. Something colder. A clarity I'd never felt before. 2 months later, Dad called again, asking for money. Not a loan money. Said it was for Mom's medical bills. But when I offered to pay the hospital directly, he broke. The story changed. Reality spilled out. More missed payments. More panic. And now, sitting at that Thanksgiving table, watching my sister beam like she'd just inherited the earth. I could barely breathe under the weight of those 2 months. They weren't giving her the house. They were giving her the debt. And they expected me to sit quietly beside her, to let the lie unfold. By November, the secret sat between us like a live wire. We didn't talk about the papers I refused to sign. We didn't talk about the truth Dad admitted on the phone. Our conversations shrank into weather updates and questions about work, small talk trying to cover a crater. They didn't know I'd dug deeper. They didn't know I'd pulled the property records myself, that I knew about the second mortgage bleeding them dry, the foreclosure clock ticking. They were drowning, and they were looking for someone to sacrifice. And at first, I assumed, like always, that someone was me. I was the stable one. The Chicago one. The one with no kids and no excuses. The one they treated like a safety net they were entitled to climb into. Saying no felt like betrayal. Until Lena started sending up little flares online, cryptic photos on the porch, jokes about big changes coming, captions that felt like taunts. And a week before Thanksgiving, Mom called me, gushing about how excited Lena was to host holidays, once everything is settled with the house. That night, I stopped hoping they'd come clean. I opened a folder of my own. Copies of overdue bills. Payment histories. Foreclosure notices. The summary pages that screamed the truth in bold black letters. I didn't plan to humiliate them. I planned to prevent them from pretending. So when I drove home that morning, folder in my bag, tension in my chest, I still thought, maybe, they'd pull me aside, confess, apologize. Instead, Mom hugged me at the door, whispering, "You look beautiful," her voice trembling. Then, softly, "Lena is going to be so happy you're here." Not we. Lena. The dining room was immaculate, sparkling, curated like a stage. Every chair filled but mine. My grandmother caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small nod, knowing sad. My hand brushed my bag. Paper against canvas. Truth against performance. When Lena rose and tapped her glass, I already knew I was about to watch their rehearsed little play unfold. She stood glowing, hair curled, wearing the necklace our grandmother gave her, the one Grandma promised would one day be mine, but somehow never reached me. Mom and Dad are signing the house to me. Grace gets nothing. Cheers. Whistles. Laughter. And me. Smiling. Not warm. Not kind. A smile with teeth. I lowered my fork. Dad, should I tell them, or will you? The room snapped into silence. Fork dropped. Faces turned. Lena's smile cracked. What are you talking about? I reached into my bag. And the storm finally arrived. I slid the folder onto the table, slow enough that every eye followed it, fast enough that my father flinched like he already knew what lived inside. Lena stared at it as if it were a snake coiled and ready to strike. Before you celebrate Lena getting the house, maybe you should know the condition it's actually in. My dad tried to recover, puffing up like he could still control the room. Grace, not here. Why not? You weren't embarrassed when you tried to hand your debt to your daughter behind her back. A ripple moved through the room, confusion, discomfort, curiosity, all twisting together. Lena's voice snapped like a whip. What debt? I opened the folder. A stack of overdue notices stared up at us. Thick red letters. Bold warnings. Months of missed payments. The kind of papers you hide in drawers until the drawers overflow. I nudged one page toward Lena. The summary line glared at her. You're behind on payments, on 2 mortgages. The second one? Taken out without telling anyone. You're weeks from foreclosure. My mother gasped. My father stiffened. Lena shook her head so fast her earrings trembled. No, they would have told me. I'm their daughter. They would have told me. Did they also tell you the house comes with over $100,000 in debt? I leaned in, voice low, steady. And that if you sign those papers, it's all yours. Her face collapsed. Panic shot through her eyes, raw, wild. The kind of panic you only feel when the people you trust most suddenly look like strangers. Dad lunged for the paper, desperate to shove the truth back into the folder. Stop. Mom's voice cracked. Please, not today. But the lie had already fallen apart. You could hear it in every breath. Feel it in every glance. See it in every horrified relative leaning away from my parents like they were witnessing a slow-motion disaster. My Aunt Diane broke the silence. Daniel, is this true? My father's jaw locked. He didn't look at her. Didn't look at anyone. Lena turned toward him, voice wobbling. Dad, tell them she's lying. He didn't. He couldn't. Tyler, her fiancé, was the next to crack. He pushed back his chair so hard it screeched. You told me the house was paid off. You said this was our fresh start. You said you wanted to give Lena everything. Lena reached for him with trembling fingers. Tyler, please. He stepped away like her touch burned. You expect me to build a life on a sinking ship? His chair toppled as he stood. Nobody moved to pick it up. Nobody breathed. He looked at Lena one last time, a long, sad, shattered look, and then he walked out. Right past the turkey. Past the stunned relatives. Out the front door without closing it behind him. The cold air rushed inside. Lena collapsed into her seat, mascara streaking down her cheeks, body heaving like a child who'd just watched her world crack in half. This isn't my fault. I didn't know. I didn't know. I know, I whispered. And I meant it. For the first time in a long time. I saw my sister, not the golden girl. Not the favorite. Just a woman who'd been lied to as deeply as I had. Dad slammed his palm on the table. You ruined everything. No, you ruined everything the minute you tried to hand your debt to your children like it was an inheritance. Mom sobbed into her napkin. You're tearing this family apart. It was already broken. I'm just choosing not to disappear inside it anymore. A low murmur rippled around the room. Agreement, disbelief, judgment, all blending into something my parents couldn't outrun. My grandmother rose slowly, pressing her hand on the table for balance. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. I taught you better than this. My father, her son, shrank into himself like a scolded child. Mom didn't look up. Lena wept quietly, her shoulders trembling. I thought the worst was over. I thought the truth was enough. But then, a loud, sharp knock rattled the front door. Every head turned. Another knock, stronger this time, official, rhythmic. Dad's voice dropped to a whisper. Who is that? The door opened. A woman stepped inside, wearing a plain suit with a badge clipped to her belt. Mr. and Mrs. Justice, she asked, we need to speak with you about your mortgage records. Gasps. A few relatives stood. Mom nearly fainted. Dad went white. The woman held a clipboard. Calm. Unshaken. We received reports of potential financial misconduct. I'll need to ask some questions. Mom reached for me, tears streaking down her face. Grace, tell her you misunderstood. Please. Please. But I didn't misunderstand. Not anymore. Their lies didn't need my protection. Their consequences weren't mine to carry. The investigator stepped farther inside, flipping through documents with a quiet efficiency that felt almost cruel. She questioned my parents gently, professionally, while the room watched them crumble under every answer they failed to give. Relatives drifted back, away from the table, away from the damage. Lena sat frozen, her hands trembling in her lap. Grandma placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, but said nothing. There was nothing left to say. When the investigator finally stepped out into the cold evening air with the documents, the door clicked shut behind her like a judge's gavel. Silence swallowed the house. Mom whispered my name, voice breaking. Grace, don't go. Dad muttered, you embarrassed us. You humiliated your own family. I slipped on my coat. No, you did that yourselves. I looked at Lena then, the girl who once braided my hair, who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares, who believed our parents' words like they were gospel. She whispered, barely breathing the words. What do I do now? For the first time in years, she wasn't asking them. She was asking me. I touched her shoulder gently. You start over. Not with their lies, with the truth. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The house went on the market. My parents moved into a tiny apartment, quiet, ashamed, finally facing the debt they'd buried for years. Lena started therapy. She called me more often. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she sat in silence. Sometimes she said thank you when she didn't know what else to say. And me? I learned that telling the truth isn't betrayal. Carrying someone else's lie is. Families built on denial always collapse. Some sooner, some later, but they always fall. If you've ever sat at a table surrounded by people who claim to love you, yet treat your silence like they're right, you already know the story isn't just mine. And if you're still here, if you stayed with me until the end, then you understand why I finally chose myself. If you've lived through anything like this, share your story below. Someone who feels alone might need your voice tonight.